All right. So, as we're hopping into our live discussion today about how do we build up a writing brand and how do we actually make money from these things, what are one of your guys' key strategies to earning revenue from a successful writing brand?
Who wants to go?
Sure.
Oh.
So I actually earn more money from my YouTube channel on world building than I do from my books.
Hmm.
But that is because the YouTube channel is a very regular income, and the books
Okay.
are when they release, there's a bump from them, and then it kind of trickles through the rest of
Hmm.
the year. And then it's a
Wait, so you
bump.
don't get all the money from your books all year round?
Um, you do, but it's a trickle. Like
Hmm.
you get a chunk when you
Hmm.
release, and then trickles.
So
Interesting.
the thing I teach is I always say you can't make a living selling books. That's not how this works. It's too expensive to sell a book. I just
Hmm.
spent 2 weeks, 1 week at Comic Con and 1 week at Gen Con. I probably spent $8,000 during those 2 weeks on
Hmm.
travel and everything else. I covered all my costs, but that's not making a living. You
Hmm.
make a living off of fans. And so that's
Hmm.
why you have the big bump when you release something new, because you already have a bunch of people that are waiting on that book to come out. Now,
Hmm.
how you make a living throughout the rest of the time is you have to market. You have to find something that's going to reach those new audiences, be that
Hmm.
Amazon ads, other social media marketing ads, podcast, guest appearances to reach new audiences.
Hmm.
Because the problem with your own podcast or your own YouTube channels or your own newsletter is those are mostly fans. And so they're waiting on the next thing.
Hmm.
Sure, you always get, every month you get a few new people that join and a few new people that whatever. But
Hmm.
really, what you have to do, you have to run it like a business. You have to spend money to make money. And so if you're not willing to put in, $500,000, $1,500, $3,500, $5,000 a month on marketing,
Hmm.
then you're going to have the problem where you have the big bump when your book comes out, and then you're going to have this trickle throughout the rest of the time before your next book comes out. So it really is those two ways, either treat it like a business and market it like a business,
Hmm.
or just keep coming out with new products so that you have those, so that the audiences that you pick up during the middle are what you pick up. And then you have fans that are buying the books when they come out. And so you have the bigger burst of sales. And that's really the two
I
things you have to
absolutely
do.
love that. That's I know what I've heard from not I've heard, but I know a lot of writers have this misconception of, okay, I'm going to get my book out there, people are going to buy it. That's how I make a full-time living off of being an author. And I know both of you guys know from being content creators that like being building brands that we need multiple sources of income. I've heard that with even the fiction genre, that to be successful, it's more about consistency and having many, many books out over many, many years, as compared to just one and done type of book.
Yeah.
Nonfiction is a little differently from what I've heard, where it's more a single nonfiction can do better. But for fiction, generally, it's readers expect a 10-book series, or they expect different books from the same author.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, no,
once
go
they
for it.
become your fan, that's what they're doing, is they're
Mhm.
wanting that next book from you. I like your writing style. You touch me in ways that, make me feel good, or get me, you deliver. Because I mean, really what we do is fantasy fulfillment. And
Mhm.
so that's what we're delivering. And so they find us and they go, wow, you took me on this journey and you allowed me to achieve whatever I'm looking for in my fantasy fulfillment. This
Mm.
scratched that itch. And so
Mhm.
now I want something else from you and something else from you and something else from you so that I can continue to go down that path. And that's really the only way that writers lose fans, is because they go, man, I should try something very different because I want, I'm bored of this and I want to do this. And I get it as a creator,
Mhm.
but your
Mhm.
fans want that itch scratched. So when you start
Mhm.
trying to scratch a different itch, you're going to lose some of these fans. You just are.
One of my favorite creators is always like, your fans, your market, they know what they want. Give them what they want on the social platform that they want it at the time that they want it, and they will respond.
Yep.
Absolutely love that. So I'm going to want to dig a little bit more into that. But before we do, I just want to welcome all of you to the Create Right Now podcast. As you can see, today we're going to be chatting about how two authors, Marie and Drake, earn a revenue and earn different streams of income from both their published books and their writing brands. They're very, very experienced. What we're going to be doing is we'll be doing a couple things. We'll actually be doing a live book editing session. So we're going to be going into the behind the scenes on how do both these authors do a technical editing session on the screen. If you're ever from from their channel, you're used to some of their live editing sessions, and we're going to be bringing it here and having a lot of fun. We'll also be doing a live book reading from their book that they wrote together, which is called The Magic Fall. So that'll be absolutely incredible. And then we'll also be going into the strategies and tactics behind, if you're a writer, how do you make money from a writing brand? The one thing that we all want. We want to publish our books, make money, and be successful with it. So that's what we'll be doing today. Now, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Create Right Now podcast. I'm Kauffman. I am a writer on a mission to help every single writer in the world show that the entire writing process, brainstorm, writing, and editing, can be both fun and easy with the right framework and the right mindset. So through that, I'm a daily writing live streamer, and I try to bring on as many writing guests and do as many collaborations as possible. And by the way, if you're watching this on the replay, I got you covered. Time codes will be added to the stream at the end of the video, so you can hop to the part of the video that brings you the most value. All right, now as we hop into the interview itself, I just want to welcome Lima, welcome to the stream. Desolate, welcome. No, I thought this would make a great collaboration. Looking forward to it. Absolutely. We have some incredible questions planned today. There's going to be a phenomenal interview. Even before the stream, we were starting to get into some dynamic conversations, and I'm like, you guys are going to need to hear these things. Colston's, welcome to the stream. And Penelope, welcome. Stephanie, welcome. And then we have a couple other guests from their channel. Colton's, welcome. I took Drake's courses at Comic-Con this year. I'm sure there will be a lot to learn today. They are so knowledgeable. Absolutely. And Tiffany, excited to hear Drake and Marie talk about all they do. Beautiful. So what a great tie-in. What a great lead-in. So for those of you who don't know, Drake and Marie are over from Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. Drake is an award-winning novelist and creative writing teacher. He brings his experience from the gaming world and beyond, while Marie is the author of the Sangwheel Chronicles and a YouTuber, where she shares her expertise in fantasy world building. Together, they delve into the intricacies of crafting compelling narratives, offering invaluable writing resources and insights. Drake and Marie joined forces to create Releasing Your Inner Dragon. This author podcast is a treasure trove of writing tips and advice to spark inspiration for every stage of the author career. Let me bring back to the stage Drake and Marie. Welcome, my friends. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today.
Good to be here.
I know there's been so much hype and interest around just creating an author's brand. I know a lot of my audience tends to be a lot of either beginner writers or unpublished writers who really want to know what's the strategy, what's the secret. I think at the heart, it's how can I follow my dream, make money off of it, and what's the way to be sustainable. So as I really think about the heart of the concept, what do you guys have any strategies or insights that you could share from your writing journeys that have worked for you in developing these brands?
Well, I'm older than Marie, and I got into this years before her. So the strategies were way different when I first dove into this. So one of the things that I did a lot of was a lot of handshaking. So I went to a lot of conventions. Every convention has something called the BarCon. The BarCon is a sub-con level underneath of a convention where the professionals deal with each other after the convention is over. It's usually called a BarCon because it usually takes place at a bar. And everyone has different. So like at Gen Con that I was just at, there is a lounge that the artists will hang out at. There's a lounge that writers will hang out. There's a lounge that game developers will hang at, or a bar or whatever. And so these aren't publicized. You pretty much have to figure out, find someone who knows to know where to go. And then just everybody goes to these places.
Mhm.
So you go there, you meet industry people, you meet agents and publishers, you meet, I would go to the artist areas and meet artists, and go to the gaming areas and meet gaming publishers and everything, and just did a lot of getting to know people. I mean, you don't sell at these things. That's the thing that will get you to have no one sit next to you. It's literally, hey, I'm Drake.
It's that networking aspect,
what I'm
making
into.
friends, meeting other writers, creatives. Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. And then, eventually somebody will like, so I guess I'm the acquisitor for this big publishing house. That's why you've been talking to me for a couple hours. You're really cool. Mm-hmm. What do you want to send me something? And it's like, sure, like totally not here talking to you because of that, but sure, I'll send you something.
So Drake, let me ask you this. So let's say I'm a writer and maybe I just published my first book. I'm excited. I want everyone to read it. How would I go to one of these conventions and like share with the world without like trying to sell my book to them, but getting people interested in me? Like what would your
now you're talking about the fans. So that's a different thing. So I was going after people who paid money to writers to do things for them. Going after fans is a completely different thing. So, I have my booth. I have, luckily I've been gifted as being known for my classes and teaching writing and everything like that. So like this was my 17th year teaching at Comic-Con, so they put me up on stage. They put me in a big room. They say, Drake is a professional. You should come listen to Drake. So it's like, they're not advertising me as a, because they're a neutral organization. So they don't pimp anyone out specifically, but I'm an invited guest, and they give me a room, and, I'm on their program guide and program schedule. So I make a lot of fans that never even know that I have a booth down there. So like the gentleman that just said he went to my class this year, I don't think he ever would have found me, just because I had a booth downstairs. I don't think he would have been walking by.
I took Jake's course at Comic-Con.
Yeah. What I think it was he was looking through the program guide for what am I going to do this year at Comic-Con. And it's like, wow, there's a writing class. I want to be a writer. Let me go check it out. I don't know what to expect. And then he comes in and he's like, okay, yeah, no, this guy, I want to learn from this guy. And so, that puts me in a room of a couple hundred people that I'm talking about writing, and I'm giving them information. I'm saying, oh, by the way, I got a booth. Like, if you want to come talk to me, you can also buy some stuff from me. It'd be really nice. Wow, so going after fans is different than going after the industry people.
So
interesting. So
yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, if I can jump in there. So I live in Europe's like backwards country, right at the top of Europe, right next to a very rambunctious neighbor. So very far from the big conventions, and the conventions around me are not in English. So if I'm writing in English, that presents its own problems. So I needed to take a different approach, right, to connecting to an audience. So I started a YouTube channel just on the principle of connecting to people. And that is any social media where you share insight into something that will draw fans will create an audience for you in that online. So that's what Drake was talking about, like going after fans. It is a good way to get fans, right? So if I think of like some of my friends, James Sutter has got a massive Twitter following. He built up a big audience on Twitter. I built up my YouTube channel based on world building and the kind of insights that I share there. But the key to that is you have to commit to a schedule. You don't have to commit to doing it every day. You don't have to commit to doing it every week, but you have to commit to a schedule. because that way both people and the algorithm, whichever platform you're on's got an algorithm, know what to expect from you, and then your stuff will start hitting that rhythm.
And obviously, as you found out, Kauffman, the more you put into it. So I know you're doing daily streams.
Only 220 and counting.
Yeah, that is an insane amount of work, but daily streams have cast a wider net. And that's really what we're all doing. We're all casting nets, and we're in different waters. You know, a lot of mine are local, face-to-face kind of stuff. I'm not a social media user heavily. I mean, I'm on it. I'll throw up a couple jokes. I'll do whatever. But, you know, I write 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words in a day. And then my marketing person is like, how come you haven't posted on social media? And I'm like, because I don't want to write another couple hundred words. I'm done. Like, leave me alone. So, you know, it's everybody has their methods of kind of how they do it. And
yeah, so, I totally get that. And this is what I tell writers. I tell writers, don't copy me. Like, it's I'm taking a very unique strategy. And once again, it's a strategy with doing a daily writing live stream. It's a strategy that I can make work with my current lifestyle. I would not have been able to make this work years back, or when I was balancing a 9-to-5 job, when I was trying to balance having a personal, a dating life, trying to have hobbies, trying to do my mental health. That would not have been possible at that stage. It's possible for me right now because I've adjusted my lifestyle around this type of schedule. And this is why, like, I can hear from both of you guys that it sounds like a huge factor is consistency in a schedule that works for wherever you're at this point in your life. Maybe combine that with like your goals.
Yeah. Like, because I have a job now. Of course, I work in Finland. So when I say my job is a 7.5 hour a day job, I mean it's a 7.5 hour a day job. There is no overtime because I don't work. It's not the USA labor laws. So I can very effectively plan around my day job without that kind of thing. But you have to be able to fit in whatever you're doing with your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. Marie has a full-time job, so she works around that schedule. I'm a full-time writer. I write from about 8:30 in the morning until 5-ish, 6-ish at night, depending on what's going on. And I'm doing that 7 days a week because, I'm a nerd and this is fun and I'm just playing.
I know, right? Because that's the heart. We have to be passionate and love what we do to be able to balance it with all those other competing priorities. Do you guys have any advice for other for writers who are maybe trying to balance having like trying to build up their writing brand or maybe writing consistency with somebody who maybe might have like a family, might be a student, might have responsibilities?
Commit. Commit. You have to. Yeah, you have to commit to slots. You have to find, like, I have Mondays and Wednesdays are writing days. They're always writing. Whatever else is going on. I always write on Mondays. I always write on Wednesdays. I always write on the weekends. Now, some of my weekends is taken up in video editing and so on as well. But, but you have to make slots and you have to stick to them. Because it has to become a habit. Even if you don't write. Let's say you don't write, maybe you do a bit of world building. Maybe you do some editing. Maybe you just like read over what you've written. Maybe like whatever you do, just do something in the scheduled slot and always try and keep the slot free.
Yeah.
Because you have to kind of pattern yourself into doing the key to all of this stuff is you must just sit down and do it. You've got to get words onto the page, and there's only one way to get words onto the page, and that's to type them. Like there is, you can't do anything else. You can't you can't magically manifest words onto the page. So you have to make the time. You've got to sit in front of the keyboard, and your fingers have got to hit the keys. Like
I call it BIC, butt in chair. Like that's what you have to do. In my writer's room, we actually have 8 writing sessions a day, 7 days a week. They started around 4 in the morning Pacific time and go to like 2:00 in the morning Pacific time.
Wow.
And
Okay.
there's 8 every single. Now, obviously, it's not about being in all of them, but like with my writers' room members, for me, it's easy. For Marie, she's already gotten into the habit of it. I mean, I write every day because it's my job. It literally is my day job. So I show up about 8:30 and I work all day. But for a lot of people, they have other things in their lives. They have their day jobs. They have their wives. They have their kids. They have their hobbies. They have their mental health, as you were saying. There's all sorts of things. And so the reason why these things are scheduled, and they're scheduled for 2 hours, each one of them, and it's just a Zoom room, inside the paid area. And what I say is pick one every week. Let's say you're free Thursdays from 7 to 9. Great. Pick the Thursday 7 to 9 slot, and then just show up every Thursday. You may be the only one in the room, but the tagline of the room is show up, shut up, and write. You don't look at email. You don't look at your phone. Like Marie said, you don't have to necessarily write. I encourage you to. I would rather you get in the habit of writing, even if it's just garbage. I don't care. Getting in the habit of putting words on paper every single week, period, I think is the most important. But if you're editing or if you're doing world building or something like that, I will allow that. But it does two things when you have that, that the writer's room can provide for you. First of all, you're holding yourself responsible. You're like, well, I've already picked this time. It's going to start. I kind of need to be there. But the other thing that it does for you, especially for the writer's room, because the writer room is a paid, it's a paid service. It's amazing how much it helps the rest of your life, everything that isn't you. So, I always tell people, why pay $50 a month to join a yoga studio? You can do yoga anywhere, because if you don't pay $50 to a yoga studio, you won't do yoga. And so it's the same thing with us. You're paying $50 now. I do classes and Q&As and critiques and all this other stuff that you get. But one of the things you're getting for that is I'm scheduled Thursdays from 7 to 9, let's say. And your spouse is like, hey, I'm paying for this service. It's Thursdays. We agreed Thursdays, 7 to 9. I'm going to do this. That's my night. And so then you have this extra thing to tell the rest of your life, I'm scheduled. I pay.
I like that. I like that ideology.
Yeah. And so it is very, very helpful for my members to, be able to lock those in. And then I say, can you pick 2 slots a week? Can you pick 3 slots a week? I mean, they're available to you. All 8 of them.
Interesting. So you kind of like work up, and then that helps them build up the consistency. So it sounds like some of the values that they're getting out of that is a mix of accountability, community, and then the technical support with some of the other things.
Yep, exactly.
Which is absolutely awesome. Awesome. So thank you for sharing that. What I want to do is I want to dive in to some of the brand building, some of the stuff you guys have done with building up your brands. Now, I know you guys have a couple brands. I know you have Releasing Your Inner Dragon, which is your guys' shared podcast. And then can you just real quick for the audience, what are your individual brands that have been generating money for you? So we can kind of get into like the minutia of what's working for you too.
Sure. So I have my YouTube channel, Just in Time Worlds, where I discuss world building topics, and it generates a regular monthly income
through ad revenue.
Yeah, through ad revenue and memberships. So the channel allows for paid memberships on YouTube, and so it generates a little bit of money through that. And basically, on that channel, I started with sharing my world building expertise. Now, I spent 20 years running role playing games in unique worlds, and I built LARPing worlds and all kinds of things. So,
absolutely love that. We're all nerds here.
Yeah, and I come from a very, very strong history and scientific academic kind of background. I've consumed a lot of content. So when I create the worlds, I draw on all of this knowledge and so on. So I started sharing that expertise with YouTube through the world building channel, and that probably takes about 4 to 5 hours a week. In terms of like scripting and shooting and then editing the video and so on. And then I live stream on there, and I do a couple of other things. on that channel. So that I would say is probably my biggest stream of income. And then I actually started the YouTube channel because I wrote a book, and so I was looking for a way to market the book, and so I picked YouTube as because much like Drake said, I didn't want to write blogs, when I've just been writing all day to get the book done. So I was like, you know what, I'll talk. I can figure out this video editing nonsense.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. So.
And then you have your fantasy saga.
Yeah. So that's the actual books that I've written, which is I've written my epic fantasy saga, Sangwheel Chronicles, which as I say, I get like a trickle of sales every month, and then every time a book comes out, I get a bump.
How many books are out for the saga so far?
Three. I'm in the process of completing the fourth and final book in this trilogy.
Ooh, the finale. Yeah. We always love a good finale. That's awesome.
And if you're in the States and you want autographed copies of the first two books of hers, I do have them at Starving Writer Studio. All proceeds go to her. I'm just the warehouse for her here in the States. But you can head over to Starving Writer Studio and pick up. And while she was here last year, she came over and went to Comic-Con with me last year when we released Magic Fall. So we have autographed copies of Magic Fall, and she left a couple of cases of each of books 1 and book 2. I don't think book 3 was out.
No.
Back then, it came out afterwards. Yeah.
So, and that's really awesome. By the way, if you want to go buy these books, or if you want to get the autographed copies of them, all of the links are down in the YouTube description below. So if you want to go check out anything about Marie or Drake, about their personal stuff or the autographed copies, definitely check out the links. Absolutely agreed.
Just a little cheaper if you're in the States trying to get an autographed copy from Finland to have a United States warehouse, because
it's a bit far.
Shipping is insane.
Marie, I can totally resonate with that, Marie. One of the reasons that I started the I did YouTube. I did like earlier versions of YouTubing years ago, but I really feel like I actually started in January. And the reason I started YouTubing and the reason I actually really started the live streaming was to hold myself accountable with my writing process, right? I know that I was going to write, and my challenge was like, okay, can I do this every day for a year? How do I hold myself accountable? I'll live stream it. I can lie to myself, and if I get lazy one day, but I can't just not show up for a live stream because then the community holds me accountable. I'm like, clearly it's worked. So I get that. Other strategies.
Are you actually writing during the live stream?
I do. So this is the unique thing, because I went out there and I looked and I was like, is there something that other writers aren't doing? I actually just finished the rough draft of my book, The Last Scarecrow, last week. And I've written it nearly every day. I would say like 85-90% of the streams on the live stream itself. I basically mix it up with writing sprints, but I show the software on the screen.
Okay.
So that was a strategy. I know there was a concern with, I know some of my friends and family, they're like, Kauffman, if you are putting it on the screen, somebody's going to steal it. And I'm like, I can literally prove that I wrote it on stream 200 plus days. Like, I guess I'm not worried about that. I feel confident I can write my story better than anyone else.
Yeah, plagiarism doesn't happen very often. It's happened to me once when I was working for Sony. Somebody, they were putting out stories that I was writing as marketing pieces, and somebody did plagiarize them and then try to sell them on Amazon.
Ooh, really?
But it was also Sony. So how I found out about it was the Sony lawyers called me and said, hey, we just found out somebody plagiarized your stories. We're on it. Just letting you know. And I was like, okay. And then like 15 minutes later, they called back and like, all right, we've already talked to Amazon. It's all taken care of. I'm like, yeah, good for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it, because then they're just sending them probably like cease and desist type things of like,
but they're also
take this down or you're going to get sued.
Yeah, there's a difference between a multi-billion-dollar company sending Amazon cease and desist letters versus me. So,
the thing about plagiarism that always, or like people going like, oh, they'll steal your ideas. I'm like, where do you think the ideas come from?
Right.
Like, I had the most ridiculous conversation with somebody online. They were like, Catherine Kerr stole her ideas from George R.R. Martin. And I'm like, okay, we need to have a conversation about publishing dates because Catherine Kerr published her books firstly. Secondly, the reason why there's a similarity between these two books is because they both drew heavily on European history. And I mean heavily on European, like very, very heavily in the creation of their worlds. That's why you're seeing a similarity. The source material is the same.
I'm of the belief that a lot of people have ideas out there, but an idea is nothing unless you execute on the idea and publish it. Otherwise, it's just going to be an idea.
Yeah, it always amazes me that people believe the order they read them in is the order of who stole what from who.
Right, because it's always based on our point of view. We are the heroes in our own stories.
Exactly. But also, I always get so sad-faced because I'm invited to speak at a lot of writers' conferences, and inevitably I'll meet somebody that's paying money to go to the writers' conference. They're learning how to write, and I'm like, oh, what are you writing? And they're like, oh, I haven't started writing yet because I haven't come up with my unique idea. And I'm always just like, oh, honey, you're never going to write then if that's what you're waiting for. I mean, you're not smarter than every single story creator for the last 10,000 years. I'm sorry. It's not about that. It's about mixing things differently than anyone else and looking at something from an angle that no one else has looked at. But in stories, there's no such thing as a completely unique original idea. Because
I mean, everything. It's that theory. Everything's been done before 1,000 times over. People want it for what is your fresh perspective on the thing that's already been done.
Yeah. And that's, it's just, we're going to look at it different. Well, in my dynamic story creation book, I've got a chapter called Spaghetti. And it's not a euphemism. It's literally a chapter about spaghetti. It's about, you've had 10 different types of spaghettis in your life, and some of them are terrible, like the school cafeteria spaghetti, and some are delicious, like your grandma's, but they all are spaghetti. They're all using the same ingredients. They're just mixing them different. And so that's in the same thing with a guitar. There's 6 strings on a guitar, and yet there's a lot of songs out there, and we're not done with them. It's not like guitarist went, well, that was the last one. We're done. We've reached the end.
I think
so.
Somebody asked me this in one of my recent live streams. They were like, how do I start with a story? And I was like, just write. Yeah. Sit down and write. Like this. Yes, sure, you can plot it. But the problem is that you can get trapped in plotting the same as you can get trapped in world building.
Absolutely.
Where you just keep plotting and sit down and write. Even if it's crappy, get some words down on the paper. You have to start somewhere, and the only place that's a real start is once you have words on the paper.
That's some absolutely great advice. So with Marie, it sounds like we were hearing a little bit about your world building channel, and then I know both your guys' podcast. Drake, what are some of your brands that are generating money for you?
So I am split in half between, I teach writing, I write books on writing, but I also am a fiction writer. I also lost the last 10 years to health issues, including a bout with cancer. So I'm now just recovering from that. I'm 2 years out of cancer treatment.
And first off, Drake, I'm so impressed by that journey. That's incredible. The fact that you went through it and that you've come out the other side, hats off to you. Absolutely.
And I get that. And I see how people feel that way. But when you're in it, you got 2 choices.
Live or die.
Live or die. So I just knuckled under. And I mean, I still feel that the reason why cancer takes so many lives, for the most part, is how horrendous the treatment is. A lot of people that I know that passed away from cancer just couldn't take the treatment and they quit. It's the shit show it is advertised as. It just is. And I don't wish it on anyone. But when you, as a creator, when you take 10 years off of creating, it hurts your career bad. I mean, I was still able, during that 10 years, I was still able to write nonfiction. So I wrote my creative writing books during that time. I was still speaking on writing, but I did not have the brain power to actually write fiction. It's a completely different level of concentration. that I just didn't have. And so now I'm back and I'm writing like crazy, and I've got a bunch of stuff coming out. But so for me, we obviously have the Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. I've got my fiction series, which even now, even though I've been very miss on creating fiction, I'm still making a living at it. And now with my new stuff coming out, obviously I'm just kind of rebuilding, because before I left, I had probably around 350,000 fans in my fan base. I was the lead fiction writer to a $600 million video game from Sony. And it's really nice.
That's impressive. Absolutely impressive.
When you're that level, and people, when you've got Sony going, this guy's the best writer we could find, you should probably read him. It helps your career out tremendously. We already talked about, I'm speaking at Comic-Con, I'm speaking at Gen Con, I'm speaking at, all these different big conventions that invite me as a professional to give advice from a platform of authority. So all of those work really well, and I still have a good reputation as far as that's concerned. It's just now.
So you're able to at least build on your reputation, your credibility a little bit.
Exactly. And so now I just got to start writing fiction again, because that's what my fiction fans want, is they want fiction.
They want more of your books.
Well, it's crazy because I have very little crossover. I maybe have 10-15%. So I've got my nonfiction fans that want to learn how to be better writers. And, like they're clamoring. My next book that I've been working on for about 1.5 years now is called The Holy Book of Grammar. And every time I see them, it's like, where's the grammar book? Where's the grammar book? Where's the grammar book? And they don't care that I've got, a 250,000 word fantasy novel dropping in December. They could care less. But then I have my fiction fans that I'm like, oh, I'm also working on this grammar book. And they're like, we don't care about that. When's your next fiction book coming out? That's all we care about. So there's very little crossover between the two. So I kind of live two different lives. And then I probably, my number one focus on, just for, because like as Marie said, no matter what you do as a writer, even marketing in between, your big paychecks are when the new book drops. So that's when your fans buy the book. That's what they're waiting on. And then you have to hunt for people to buy books after that.
And then Drake, I'm curious, what books do you have out, or how many books have you published? And then are there any that you want to shout out right now to our audience?
So across my career, I have probably over 30 when you include anthologies and everything else.
Like that's impressive. Well, once again, that's awesome.
Taking 10 years off, almost everything I have is out of print.
You put out 30 books, like so many writers struggle with putting out one book. So
but like I said, most of it is out of print now. And so now I've got my 3 creative writing books, working on the 4th of that series. And then fiction wise, I'm the lead fiction writer for Harnworld now. They're the oldest fantasy campaign setting in the game. They've been in business for about 42 years. They've actually never brought anyone in to write fiction in their world until the owner read me last year. And now my first story for them dropped last month when we were at convention.
And you said what was it called one more time?
Harnworld. Harn.
And you said it was a fantasy campaign. What is that exactly?
So it's tabletop role playing. So like Dungeons and Dragons.
Awesome.
So
very familiar. Of all I'm huge on tabletop. D&D was one I just never had the right fan group community to actually sit down and play with.
Well, I also wrote for Shadowrun at one point. I'm still sitting on a contract for them, but unfortunately it was before cancer, and I just have never gotten around to fulfilling that contract. At this point, I don't know if they know I have a contract. It's been a while.
Maybe something to touch back in on.
Maybe if I get time. I've got a lot on my plate right now. So so I've got that. I've got my writer's room, which is, I'm in the writer's room every day. I do critique groups every single week. Marie's also in there doing a critique group every week. I do classes, plotting sessions, Q&As, workshops, all sorts of different things in there. So I spend a lot of time in the writer's room, probably about 20 hours a week, working with others for that. And then I've got this big fantasy thing coming back out. My first book is dropping on that in December. And if I have time, I'm trying to go into production on a YouTube cartoon next month. I just picked up an animator. I've got a bunch of other things going on with that. And then I just got hired to write a series of movie scripts. So
Woo! That's awesome.
Time. So that's why I'm writing 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, because I've got a lot.
It sounds like you have a lot of different projects that you're now balancing and juggling towards your entire writing career.
Yeah, and that is a product of losing 10 years and now coming back.
So now you're kind of hit the ground running, coming back to it.
Yep. I had my 55th birthday yesterday. So.
Oh, well, happy belated birthday.
So, yeah, you lose 10 years in a career like that, and you start feeling the bite of time, and you get really motivated to just get on the horse and ride as hard as you can.
It's almost like it's like a bigger motivation for you to I got to do all this yesterday.
I've got to do all the writing today, all the writing. So yeah, and Marie loves to hammer on me about trying to keep me, because she's like, one of her favorite sayings is,
I had a boss way back when I just come out of university.
Okay.
And this man was probably the best mentor I could ever have asked for. And he taught me a very valuable thing. And I was I've been a software developer all my life, basically, all my working life. And in software development, there's a very big habit of people saying yes and then working overtime to make things work and all that kind of thing. And the first time that happened, he said to me, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
I've heard that one.
Even if what you're saying no to is quality. You might say yes, you might do all these things, but your quality is going to go down the tubes. So
I won't allow my quality to go down to two. So it's what I'm saying no to is sleep and family time and
who needs sleep? Well, we'll sleep when we're dead.
That's right.
And making deadlines. I mean,
so far
I've actually heard that. So because I'm going hardcore. So Drake, I totally resonate with your consistency. Ever since I've started up this writing business this year, I'm easily doing probably 12, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. But for me, it's sustainable right now because I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I'm doing, and I'm consistent with all the competing priorities. There were times in my life where I tried to be doing writing as part of my schedule when I was doing maybe a 40-hour week job, and I just wasn't able to even balance that because I wasn't in the right place in my life to be able to juggle those, things that I needed to do. Yeah. So that's absolutely incredible. So it sounds like you have a lot of different writing brands going on, which is absolutely awesome. And this two questions come to mind. I'm okay, so with making money, would you say with new authors, do you recommend trying to make money with a consistency of all right, let me just get out more books, or with, okay, let me build up some type of brand or some type of presence or maybe some type of community to help make another source of income?
So I would say it depends on your genre.
Okay.
So I'll illustrate by means of an example. Besides the epic fantasy, I have a line in erotic fantasy that I write.
Okay.
Under a different name.
Absolutely. Awesome.
You can look up Talia Tethers if spicy fantasy is your thing. So
trust me, I know I have a huge audience who likes that spicy fantasy.
Then you will have fun there. So what I have noticed there in my research there, and I haven't quite hit 6 novellas yet, but that's kind of what I'm aiming for there, is that has a content devouring cycle. So if you are in a genre that is erotica, romance, mystery, okay, anything, and I'm not in any way saying this to knock these genres, okay? I don't look down on them or judge them or anything, but anything which is vaguely formulaic in nature, it has a structure to it, right? So if you are in any of those genres, more content, because those readers want to consume content. They are voraciously hungry for content of that structure. Okay? So you got to pump those out, and you got to pump them out.
That's what I've heard. I know with fiction in general, the expectation is consistency because people always want more books.
Yeah. But if you are like on the epic fantasy side, that is a different genre. Okay, that is not a genre where the fans are looking to consume a new book every 6 months. Right?
I mean, they are, but they want quality above everything else. So they know that.
So there's a higher interest in the quality as compared to just.
I want to push back. I want to push back on you both here because it's not the quality. Yes, of course, but some mystery novels, some romance novels, they're high quality, right? It's not about the quality. It's about that epic fantasy fans don't want that same. They don't want the same.
Right.
They don't want the same
I see where you're going with that.
Your structure for epic fantasy needs to be your own thing. It can't be a templatized thing. Otherwise, they're going to start screaming about tropes and reuse, and and you're going to get panned for that kind of thing. Because
so they want it to feel like it's a brand new system.
Yes, and world. They want you to really delve into the world. They want you to give them more. Like much in a deeper context, right? So you can't churn those books as fast because you cannot use the same structure. Because if you use the same structure, your fans is going to boot you because that's not what they want.
Right.
Whereas your structure genres, they want that structure. They're reading for that structure.
Yeah. And that's basically what I'm saying. They want it every 3 months if they could get it. They just know they can't get it and get what they want. So they're willing
because it takes that much more time to be able to churn out such intensive world building, absolutely, in these epic fantasy stories.
Plus they want, like, here's my creative writing book and here's one of my fantasy books. So they want a thicker book. You try to give a fantasy fan something like this, and they're like, "What is that? A pamphlet?" Like, I don't.
Somebody told me that sometimes fiction readers, and I don't know if this is true or not, will sometimes expect the first books of series to be a little shorter because they don't know.
So there's differences between all of them, but epic fantasy is still epic fantasy, and epic fantasy readers, like, one of the weird things that I had in my career, because I'm a big why guy. I don't care about what you're doing. I want to know why. So early in my career, I'd go to conventions. I was doing 20, 25 conventions a year. And inevitably, once or twice during the year, somebody would see my booth and they would turn and come to my booth. And they would go, "Oh, I read this book." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. How'd you like it?" And they're like, "I didn't like it at all." And I'm like, "Okay, interesting that I just saw you literally go out of your way to come over here and talk to me. So that was weird. I would never do that. But, good on you." But I'm not the type of person that's like, "Oh, well, you're mad, I'm mad at you," or whatever. I want to know why. And so what I started doing was I started asking who they read. And I would say, "Okay, so how do you like Robert Jordan, George Martin, Brandon Sanderson?" Like, "Oh, I hate all those guys." And I go, "Well, how do you like Terry Brooks and David Eddings and, stuff like that?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I love those guys." And I'm like, "Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Right. You're an adventure fantasy fan. I write epic fantasy. Stop reading me because you don't like epic fantasy." Like Jordan, Martin, Brandon Sanderson, me, we're epic fantasy writers. There's a difference between adventure fantasy, your Terry Brooks, your David Eddings, and, your epic fantasy. And every time it was that. Every time when
interesting. So you think it's clarifying the distinction of the subgenre,
right? Because they think fantasy is fantasy.
Will mix them all up into this is what it is. So maybe it's just a
lot of people just see fantasy. But the difference is with epic fantasy fans want to wallow in the world, as Marie was saying. They want to discover the magic. They want to really understand the culture. They want more than just a story. They want to live and breathe in something that feels real. And so that's why epic fantasy books are thicker, because we're going to spend a little bit more time. Hopefully we've learned from Tolkien, and we're not going to write 3 chapters of them walking through some woods. Hopefully we're smart enough not.
We also have to recognize that when Tolkien wrote these books,
He was the
society
first.
was different, right? Expectations were different.
But he was also the first. He had no one to go, oh, wow, that was a mistake. I probably shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that excuse. Like, we're not the first. So, you know, we don't want to bore our readers. We want it to be entertaining and interesting as they learn the society and the magic and everything like that. But that is the difference. There's a big distinction between epic fantasy and just regular adventure fantasy. Almost all epic fantasy fans are also adventure fantasy fans. But there are some adventure fantasy fans that epic fantasy is just too heavy for them. And so they end up bogged down and they don't like it. And that's fine. I mean, that's why there are so many genres, is because there's so many different types of readers. And you just got to find the niche that you're in and, you know, what you like and what you don't like. So that's just what I found. I found that there was a lot of, you know, when those few occasions happen, it can only happen a couple times a year, but every time they didn't like anyone who wrote epic fantasy, and they didn't know why, because they were just like, it's just fantasy to them. I'm like, okay, let me educate you a little bit so that you can not waste money in the future. You know, you're not an epic fantasy fan, so stop going down that road.
But the same applies to, like, let's say you read Joe Abercrombie, and you reach the end of Joe Abercrombie, and you're like, well, that sucked. Chances are you're not a grimdark fan, and you should probably stay away from you know, from Joe's books and from Mark Lawrence's books and stuff, because those guys all write grimdark.
Yeah,
like that's their thing. And if you didn't like Abercrombie's first law series, you're not going to like their books either. I promise you.
Right.
Well, I just have to say, I know it sounds like a lot of that was resonating with you guys, especially with Marie, what you were saying. I know Katie was saying a ferocious reader of many genres, waving the amen hanky over what Marie is saying.
Thanks,
and
Katie.
I know, especially with that, the consistency and writing in your genre. Penelope was saying, I wrote both genre literature and speculative fantasy. So thank you, Marie, for these distinctions. This helps me organize my day better. There's some just good call outs I wanted to throw out there. So as we're talking about the different elements of fantasy, clearly we're all fantasy nerds here, and I absolutely love that. For our fantasy audience, are there any, what would you guys say would be your number one like fantasy book you guys would recommend for any fantasy readers out there in whatever subgenre is
I mean, besides our own, obviously. You know?
wait. You guys have your own books? What a perfect time to advertise them. What are your books one more time?
They can actually download the first 70,000 words of my book that's dropping in December. If they just go to Starving Writer Studio, they can click on it there, but if they can remember, it's /Genesis. But even on the front page, there's a link that so you can download the first 70,000 words of it. It's actually this. I was selling this at conventions.
Can you move the that cover just a little closer to the screen? I always like to look at different cover designs. That is very cool.
I'm trying to get it so it doesn't have my screen.
I know, it doesn't have the glare. That is a very cool cover design. Did you hire a cover design artist for that?
So this was drawn by Magic the Gathering artist Lars Grant West.
Oh, that makes I definitely see that MTG. I could see that as a card. That makes sense.
Yeah. So he is an amazing artist. But yeah, so that's what I recommend. If you want some really good fantasy, I also recommend Marie's.
Yeah, so you can pick up Sangwheel Chronicles. Drake's got the signed copies in the United States, or you can pick up, the ebooks are available widely everywhere. I'm not just on Amazon. So on my website, I have a book portal, and you can go through the book portal there. My erotica's listed there. The Sangwheel's listed there, and the book that Drake and I wrote together, Magic Fall, which is the first in Skies of Destiny. You can also pick up that book.
It's actually on sale for 99 cents. I don't know if it's still supposed to be on sale.
But it is. So if you go to Amazon right now, you can pick up the EPUB for 99 cents.
When you just said that, I was like, did she ever tell me to take it off sale? Because before I went to convention, she was like, all right, I do my summer sale, so I'm gonna throw Magic Fall as a part of that, change the price. And I was like, okay, and I changed the price. And then that was the last I thought about it. And so when she said that, I was like, I wonder if it's still on sale for 99 cents.
So this is absolutely a great call out for if you're here in the stream with us right now. If you want to go check out either of their books, either of the books from their series, their websites and the Amazon links are all linked down in the YouTube description down below. I believe I had the Amazon links for it was your guys' shared book. Which that's exciting. So what we're going to do is we're going to be hopping into a couple different topics. So we're going to be doing a live editing session and a book reading section as well. I think this is a great time for us to hop into this. So let me just promo this real quick. So what we're going to do, we're going to hop into a live editing session. We'll pull up the software on the screen and we're going to show you how we do an editing of a Word document line by line. For those of you who are used to Drake and Marie's Unleashing Your Inner Dragon podcast, they do live editing sessions like this, so you might be familiar with it. And then we're going to do a live reading of their book that they wrote together called Magic Fall. After that, we'll do our Q&A section. So if you have a question, about building up a writing brand and making money for yourself, drop it in the comments. Keep those questions coming. Drop them down below and we'll pose them and we'll do our Q&A after the sessions. Beautiful. And by the way, if you're getting any value out of this, follow and subscribe. Daily writing live streamer, doing all the stuff from writer, author interviews, writer podcasts, critique sessions, daily sprints, and much, much more right here on Right Now. All right, beautiful. So I have my screen pulled up here for the editing section. Let me pull this here. All right, Drake and Marie. So for this editing story, so can you guys just walk us through what the story is exactly, and then what your process is when you go into a live editing session?
Near you.
Okay, so our process is it's very advanced. This is like super secret stuff.
Ooh,
we open the document and then we put it into review mode, and then we switch on Zoom and I start reading and we start arguing about what's good and what's not.
So it all comes out in the arguing. You're like, because good is subjective. I have to know, how do you guys get through some of these arguments if you guys are on completely different sides of like, Drake, you believe this is good, or Marie, you believe this is good?
Oh, that's easy because we both know it's subjective. So it's like, there you go, guys. There's two different opinions on this thing.
Yep.
Like we don't, even though me and Marie may argue about stuff, we don't fight about anything.
Right.
Like
we're clearly both right. I mean, neither of us are ever wrong. Therefore,
Maria, I love that. We're clearly both right. Oh, I love that.
Just two ways to look at the same thing.
When you guys are working together, and we'll be getting to your book in just a little bit, but when you guys are working together, are you guys working on like a Google Docs link together, or what is that like?
Microsoft setup? Word. So
Microsoft Word, okay.
Yeah, so we both we have Microsoft. We both have Microsoft Word, and we share the document over OneDrive, and we both edit the same document.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So we're going to be editing this piece of flash fiction. Do you want to give any background on it before we get into it?
So this was a submission from one of my members of the writers' room. I just put out a call and said, "Hey, we're looking for 300 words." Handful of people sent some things in because they had like 24 hours to do it. Marie went through them and picked one that had none of the smaller problems. We didn't want to do grammar and punctuation and everything like here. We wanted to get into something a little bit higher end. So this is a really well-written piece that has just got things that could definitely be improved. And so we're going to talk about, I think the main thing we're going to focus on today is looking at the difference between telling and showing, and why being a little bit more visceral in your writing will help to draw the reader in deeper into the story. And again, turn them from a reader to a fan. because that's the big thing you want to do. Anyone can read your book, but if they never read anything else of yours, then you're not doing yourself justice. I mean, you sold a book. If they
I like that.
are really pulled in and go, wow, I want to read everything from this person. Now you've created a fan. Now you don't have to market to that person ever again. You just have to make sure that you keep in touch with them and let them know when your next thing's coming out.
That makes sense. I absolutely love that that mindset, which I don't think a lot of new writers or first-time published writers are really thinking about that, because their goal is like, I just want everybody to read my book.
Right.
But
so actually, here's the heart of it, and this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt anybody who. Okay. I mean, there's a reason why my series is called Drake's Brutal Writing Advice. I don't pull punches. I'm not mean. I just don't pull punches. First-time writers fall into the same trap most of the time. They actually think people want to read them because they like their story. They have decided that their story is successful. What I try to teach people is the writer does not have the ability to decide whether their story is successful or not. That is not them that get that ability. Only readers get to decide if you're successful. That's why I always say, I write for readers. I don't write for me. I write for other people. And they're the ones that decide if I have done my job or not. I don't get that ability. It's not in my wheelhouse. And so a lot of writers, they fall into that trap of, well, you're going to read me because I love my story. And so therefore it deserves to be read. No, that's a wrong mindset. And you'll fail as a writer almost every time if that's your mindset.
I think that's great advice that every unpublished writer needs to hear. I agree with them.
I would even
for
say
me, I think it's finding that balance between what you love, between your love, right? You have to have your authentic writing, but then understanding what it is that your readership actually wants from you. And I think that journey that's the journey.
Well, to close the loop,
awesome. I
was going to say to close the loop really quickly. So let's say I write a scene that I think is awesome and it does what I want to do for the story, but I give it out to my beta readers and 30% of them or more don't feel that it works. It doesn't mean that I'm now going to write a piece of garbage that I hate that meets what they want. It means I'm going to write something else that I love that, hopefully meets what they want. And so what I'm really looking for, I'm never going to put out anything that I don't love, but I'm not going to put out something that I love that they don't. So it has to be both. It has to be, I love it and they love it. And then it does everything it needs to do for the story.
That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So with this piece of flash fiction, I will let you guys do your thing. I'll be the fingers here. I'll do the changes.
We'll just read a paragraph at a time and talk about it real quick.
All right. So shall I read? I normally do the reading. Okay.
Yes.
So the Magai stumbled backward, his heart pounding against his ribs as the creature flung itself against the invisible barrier with a bellowing roar that rang off the stone walls of the workroom. The air above the intricately carved wards on the wooden floor rippled as the bulging muscles on its arms bunched and strained. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I have a few things to discuss. Drake, you want to start?
Okay. I ought to start with the easy one, the low-hanging fruit. The last it's, I wouldn't use a pronoun there because technically that points back to you could say, if it points back to the subject, we point back to the air. It could be pointing back to the wooden floor, but it doesn't point back to the monster. And so I would definitely expand upon that to make sure that we don't have a pronoun misuse.
And I think actually, I'm not even sure you need the it's. I think you can just say bulging muscles on the arms. It would kind of be instinctive what that is.
Yeah.
Or maybe on the monster's arms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I say. It needs a more defined.
Yeah.
So we don't get lost in the pronoun shuffle.
I cannot tell you how many people use pronouns wrong. Right. And I'm not being like weird here. I'm being literally, they use pronouns wrong. Their pronouns end up pointing back at the wrong person in the conversation. And then you end up with like confusing situations where you're like, okay, did this person just hug themselves? or did the
Mm-hmm.
person screw up the pronouns? Because one of these two things happened here.
Yeah,
I
pronoun
think
always
because
points
they
back
focus
to
on the action, right? So they're focused on like, okay, the cool action, but then they
Right.
just throw in
Yeah.
the pronouns as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pronouns always point back to the last noun. You can get away with it when you have, like, let's say you have a male and a female talking in the same scene.
Yeah.
You know, so you
can
might have
use she.
Jill,
You can use he, him, and she, her.
right. You might have Jill hug John and then she, and technically she points back to John, but not really, because no one's going to make that mistake.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
but for something like it's, when there's a lot of it's in this, you've got this invisible barrier, you've got the workroom, you've got the floor, you've got the air doing whatever, you got these carved wards, like it's just.
If you've got 2 women or 2 men, you have an equal problem. Or if you're writing in Finnish, you have a similar problem, because Finnish doesn't have gendered pronouns.
Doesn't have pronouns.
No, it has pronouns. It just doesn't have gendered pronouns.
Right.
It doesn't have gender. What it doesn't have is it doesn't have articles. So it doesn't have or the or whatever. It also doesn't have a future tense. So
right.
Anyway, so what I actually have more of a problem with is the first sentence and the second one, but the first sentence is very overstuffed with information. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to explain what I mean by overstuffed. A sentence contains a certain amount of information that the reader is being asked to consume. If you jam too much information into a sentence, the sentence basically is like a fire hose hitting the reader in the face, right? As opposed to a kind of a more gentle trickle that glides down their throat and gently like alleviates their thirst and provides them with some information. And what we have here, so I'm just going to break apart the pieces of information to show you what I mean. So
I see. I'm literally, because there's so many different topics in here that you're speaking to. I think I see like 6 or 7 different things happening in the scene.
So we have the McGee. So we're introduced to the McGee, and his or her action, their action, they're stumbling backwards. Then we have the his. Okay, so stumbling backwards, his heart pounding against his ribs. So his heart is pounding and he has ribs. Okay, because these are now another piece of information we're given. And then as the creature flung itself against the invisible barrier, so there's an invisible barrier, with a bellowing roar that rang off the stone walls of the workroom. We are getting 10 pieces of information in one sentence. That is too much. From a reader's perspective, it's like being told, open wide, and here comes the whole meal. You know?
And the reason why sentence structure is so important is the subject and the action, which the subject, if we were to break this down, this is a compound, complex sentence. The mad guy is our subject, and stumbled is our action. Everything after that just starts to become watered down. And then by the time you get to the end of it, you don't remember the details, as opposed to, I like to explain sentence structure as this is when the reader swallows, is at the period. So if we just said the mad guy stumbled back, his heart pounding against his ribs, period. So now we see it, we feel it, we swallow it. And then, I would probably start with an action reaction instead of a reaction action. So that's another problem that I have with this sentence. So I would start with the creature flung itself against the invisible barrier, period. And then that gives me my action. And then the reaction is the mad guy stumbled back, his heart pounding against his ribs. So there's also an reorder kind of problem that I would have with this. But yeah, and as we go through this, you'll see that there's a lot of run-on sentences, and every single one of them. Same thing with the next sentence in this. The air above so we got the air above, the intricately carved wards, the wooden floor, it's rippling, and there's bulging muscles on the monsters, and they're, bunched and strained. So we have 6 different things that we're shoving at the reader in the second sentence. This could
I think it feels like they're trying to describe it too much. That's really what it feels like. They're trying to use too much description.
No, I'm not going to push back on you. It's not too much description. You can see the 2 epic fantasy authors going, no,
details, right? Love details. Gotta get details.
So it's not that there's too much description; it's that there's too few sentences.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I were to rearrange this, I would the Magi stumbled backward, his heart pounding, full stop. Right? You don't need the against his ribs unless it's really important to show that he has ribs.
Right.
Yeah. Most readers will assume he has ribs, because you assume it's human until otherwise. Okay, so the Magi stumbled backward, his heart pounding. The creature flung itself against the invisible barrier, but slid off like a cartoon character. Worded better than that. Because that's what's in my head, right? It's just it's like one of those old-time cartoons that kind of scrapes down in like the set position.
I could see that, and that's a clear.
That may change the entire feel of this moment, though.
But that's what was in my head. I was like, it's like Wile E. Coyote going.
And that's the beautiful thing. There's no right or wrong way. There's a lot of best practices.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then so it flung itself against the invisible barrier with a bellowing roar. The sound...
Actually, I like the roar being its own sentence. Even a roar bellowed from the beast, ringing off the stone walls of the workroom, because that you can really. Again, it's also about thinking about what is the power. So I don't want to necessarily divide the roar from the stone walls, because the stone walls of the workroom, that's a pretty mundane detail. So I don't mind that being tagged onto the end of a sentence, because of the fact that it's mundane. And so that I'm not worried about, as long as it's the second piece of information, not the 10th piece of information.
Then the second sentence
has
a slightly
I do want to just touch on one last thing on here, because again, for me, especially as the opening of it. So the way we tell stories is one word at a time, and hopefully those words turn into a sentence, and hopefully you have other sentences that turn into a paragraph. And the reader is going to paint a picture as they read. And so order to me is vitally important. So that's why I said starting off with the creature first, which is the action, and then the reaction against it, I think is going to paint a better picture for the reader than the Magi stumbled back, his heart pounding. And you're like, okay, but why? I don't care. I'm disconnected at that point. And then you're giving them the connection point, which is the creature flinging itself against the invisible barrier. So I think starting with that is going to be a stronger way.
I hear you, but I would push back and back up the scene by one action beat.
Yeah, sure. We could definitely back up in time a little bit and set the scene. 100%.
Well, I would back up to have the Magi either cast the ward or step into the ward or something like that. And the reason why is so that your Magi, who is your point of view character, is taking the first action in the scene.
Yeah.
Rather than the monster taking the first action, and then the reader's introduction to the character is as a reaction rather than as the character being active.
Yeah, 100%.
But wouldn't it depend on what the intention is of the scene, though? Because
that's
maybe the author wants the intention to focus on the monster, and the monster's a whole
it's also the author seems like they want to start in media res, in action. And so if you want to start in action, that's fine. But the problem with starting with the Magi stumbling back is that it's not connected to anything. We don't understand anything. So we're starting the reader off confused. And you're not confused at a creature flinging itself against an invisible barrier. You see the creature, you see the invisible barrier. You're like, there it is. But I agree with you, Marie. Like, again, me and you like to start our scenes slower than right in the middle of this action. I 100% agree with you. Backing up in time is probably how me and you would choose to do it. But again, if you wanted to start in media res, and that's fine too. There's no, as you've already said, Kauffman, there's no wrong way. It's just decisions that you make. I still say starting with the Magi first, even though that does start us in the POV character first, it means that the first sentence is going to be confusing to the reader because they have no reason of why this Magi is stumbling back. There's no
that I agree. I think as a piece of flash fiction right now, it's confusing on what's starting off with the Magi. That I agree with.
And this is what we mean by we argue it out, and then the reader,
I love it.
Decide. I like this way. I like that way.
Like enjoy this process with you guys. I'm just like, gonna sit here, be eating my popcorn and commenting.
So the only reason why I would like to back it up one beat to have a magi action is because even in a flash fiction, even in media res, you want the reader to connect to an active protagonist.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Unless you very deliberately are casting the protagonist to be a more reactive person or whatever, like that's a personality trait you're emphasizing. You want the protagonist to be protagonisting.
Yeah.
Right. And as such, you want them to take the first action in a scene rather than having them be reacting.
And having
you were starting this with an action
in their introduction, especially because the introduction sets the tone. So
and
that's
having having the magi. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I would just back it up like one step and have the magi actively put in place a defense or see the monster or something.
Right. And that's what I was saying. If you can also start in media res with the magi feeling the magic flowing through him as he's creating these wards and as he's calling for this, because I'm assuming when you get down in here, he's actually summoned this creature. It wasn't there before. And so that is still pretty active to have the scene start just as I'm finishing my spell to cast this genie, this genie, whatever it is, to come up. So instead of starting with the genie attacking an invisible barrier and it already exists, just moving back a beat, that is still in media res. That is still, you don't have to move back 10 minutes where it's like, and then he mixed the wart's eye with the frog's legs and you have this, boring thing of that or, whatever. You can still start it. It's just, you're just starting
just start with the last action that the magi actually took, the last active action the magi
that doesn't need a reaction.
Yeah, that would be my
if you guys were to add a sentence, what would the action be?
I would start with feeling the magic flowing through him as he's calling this genie.
Yeah.
So
something like power flooded the magi's body as he completed his spell.
Right. As the last words of power left his lips.
Yeah.
His eyes widened as the floor crackled open between the magic wards he had set, whatever.
Yeah. Like some kind of just introduction to it.
Yeah. Because now we're in the magi and he's not reacting to anything. He's active. He's doing something.
Yeah. And then the creature flung itself against the invisible barrier.
Well, so actually now we can one of the ways to show a sudden movement is to do the reaction first. So there might be a line or two of what the djinn looks like, what it's doing, and all of a sudden, and then to break the kind of monotonous of we're describing a djinn, he stumbles back, his heart pounding, bam, the creature, slams against the metal, the invisible barrier and all this other stuff. So doing things out of order, for the most part, you want to write in an action, reaction order. When you switch that, when you do the reaction first, the reaction is always going to give the reader a moment of confusion, which is good if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So later in this story, if we start there, describe the djinn, and then have it attack, I probably would have him stumble backwards first, to give that, wait, what's going on? Oh, the creature's attacking, to have that. So it's always about control. It's always about controlling what the reader is feeling at the moment. So
that I would describe creature here.
Yeah.
I think that's what would go there.
Yeah.
If I can attack correctly.
So that does all of our problems, solves all of our problems. It gives you introduction to the magi first so that we know who the POV character is. It does it in media res. It then gives us time to set the scene. It then, and we can do all this in a paragraph or two. We're only talking about maybe 50 to 75 words. So it's not even like you're talking about adding an insane amount of stuff. And whatever you do up here in describing the djinn, you can take away from down below where we describe the gin. So we're just relocating that up.
And yeah, so the second sentence, besides the overstuffing problem, which is the same run-on problem, I don't like the air above the intricately carved words. I don't like the order it's in, and I don't like the intricately carved. And I'll tell you why for both of them. The air rippling is the cool part here, but it's being buried away, right? Because we have the air, and then it goes above the intricately carved wards on the wooden floor, and then we have rippled. So you're literally hiding what's cool about the sentence with a nothing description, because intricately carved wards tells me bugger all.
And if we diagram this sentence, the subject is actually the air above the intricately carved wooden or wards on the wooden floor. That's the subject.
Yeah.
That is a huge freaking subject that distracts, and then you get to the action, and the action is rippled.
Yeah. So a better way would be to establish, we've already established the wards.
Right. We would already do that before.
So we established the wards in the casting part, and then you're like, the air rippled as the monster's bulging muscles bunched and strained.
Yeah.
Because the air rippling is the cool part. Like he is so buff and he flexes so hard, the air ripples. He creates his own wind. That is freaking cool. Don't hide that.
Like that, the air rippled as the monster's bulging muscles bulged.
Bulging muscles bunched and strained.
Bunch. Like that sounds better. Bunched and strained.
And it would be not in strength, but and strained.
And strained.
And I said bunched and strained.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, that's a little overriding, but now we're getting really nitpicky.
Yeah.
And also, ly adverbs are always crappy, lazy writing. Now, doesn't mean cut every one of them. I use at least one a page, one every 2 pages. But ly adverbs are always, no matter how you use them, they're always just lazy writing. This one is not
why is
egregious, but there's some later on that if we've just spent 20 minutes on one paragraph, and this is usually the way me and Mary are. We're like, you can send us 1,000 words. We're not going to get past about 300. It's just not going to happen. No matter how good you think your writing is, we're literally going to dig so deep that we're going to be there for a while.
But I think this is incredible because it gives writers different types of insight in other ways of editing, right? For things that they didn't think about.
Yeah.
Sorry if you can hear my cat. He's suddenly gotten very excited.
Aw, I think your cat agrees. Okay, beautiful. So I think we had a good, I think this was a good start for this paragraph. Paragraph number 2.
All right. So let me just get back to, okay. So after several failed attempts, the creature stopped and glared with malevolently slitted eyes in a disconcertingly human-appearing face. No one would mistake it for human, however, if not for the ochre-red skin, pointed ears, and yellow irises, then for the fact that its lower half was comprised of swirling grey smoke that whipped around like a miniature tornado. Okay, Drake, do you want to start?
Yeah, I've got a lot of things on this paragraph. You got your 2 ly adverbs up front. So the first one is a great example of adding nothing. And there's 3 ways that I try to teach people that you shouldn't use adverbs for. And one, if it adds nothing. So if you read this sentence, the creature stopped and glared with slitted eyes. It doesn't feel any different than the creature stopped and glared with malevolently slitted eyes, because glared already implies malevolence. So that ly adverb literally is worthless. And then the second one is a different way of that I tell you not to use ly adverbs, which is your telling. So what does a disconcertedly human appearing face look like? And when I'm teaching how to turn tells into shows, the first is to recognize them. So the way this would be, there's many different ways to notice when you're telling. One is it ambiguous? Is the reader going to see what you see? And if the answer is no, then it's ambiguous. So when you say a disconcertingly human appearing face, I'm going to see one thing that you're never going to see that I see. So that's so ambiguous that it's just not doing anything for the story. So to turn a tell into a show, we have to ask a question. What, and the question changes. This is a visual. So visually, what does a disconcertingly human appearing face look like? And there's a lot of different answers. Maybe the creature's nose and jaw were like a grotesque reflection of a human face, or the creature's features were too symmetrical, too human, until the yellow irises and sharp inhumane teeth betrayed its monstrous nature. Like, there's, show me what a disconcertingly human appearing face looks like so that I visualize what you are trying to get me to visualize. If you are too ambiguous, then I'm going to visualize whatever I want. And then later, when you hit me with this the ochre red skin, pointed ears, and yellow irises, I'm going to go, yeah, that's not what I pictured when I pictured a disconcertingly human appearing face. And now I'm thrown out of the story. So we want to make sure that the reader sees what we want them to see, so that we're not throwing them out later when we give them those details and they don't match up with what I imagine with your vague statement.
Yeah. 100%. So the two ly adverbs are particularly egregious because they're right next to each other. Then so I don't like the after several failed attempts, but okay, this is flash fiction, so fine. But what is really egregious to me is no one would mistake it for human, however.
Yeah.
What does that add? We're in the middle of an action scene. What is this rhetorical statement in the middle of an action scene?
So the reason why it is there is because the ambiguity of the sentence before. If you take out the ambiguity, and that's what I've got in my notes, by eliminating the tell above, this line is no longer needed. So as soon as you take out the telly ambiguity of the disconcertingly human appearing face, now you've already shown that no one is going to mistake it for human. So there's no reason to then tell the reader that no one would mistake it for human.
Exactly. So, the only reason why that line is there is because your first line, your descriptive line, is too weak to stand by itself. Yep. And you don't fix a weak sentence by adding a second weak sentence.
Right.
You fix the weak sentence.
Right. Exactly.
So that's my first problem. And then besides the fact that the last sentence is a run-on sentence, it's also you're burying the coolest part of this thing. Yep. At the end of a run-on sentence, its lower half is gray smoke whipping around like a miniature tornado.
That's so cool.
Yep.
That is freaking cool. Put that first.
Well, not just put it, not necessarily that it has to go first. It's that it needs its own sentence.
Yeah.
When you break these things out in their own sentences, they stand. They stand with power, and the reader must take notice because I've already swallowed the last sentence at the period, and now I'm focusing on this new sentence with a period. And so that's where both me and Marie were pushing back on you a little bit, Kauffman, when you were like, too much detail. It's like, well, it is if it's all run on, 100%. You just, if all you're going to do is fix the run on by just slicing out information, that works too.
Interesting.
But
okay.
You can literally not lose any of that detail, break them up into their own sentences, and you have these powerful moments that all matter and bring a lot of richness into the narration.
Yeah. Rich description adds a lot, right? But it needs to be consumable sentences, not humongous run-on.
There is actually something else that it needs, because just a paragraph of just detail, period, detail, period, detail, period, detail, period, detail would suck.
Yeah.
You do have to make it personal to the POV. You have to add in action. You have to add in emotion. You have to add in sensory details. Like there is other things that need to go along with just the detail, but we don't have time to go into all that detail.
Yeah, so this author has actually done a very typical mistake. So let me just read the next paragraph and I'll explain, okay?
Yeah.
So the Magi nearly collapsed on trembling legs. He released a shaky breath as he clutched his work table behind him with one hand and wiped the sweaty strands of his rusted hair away from his forehead with the other. Okay, so besides the run-on sentences, besides all of that stuff, the mistake the writer has made is they've got all of the description in one paragraph. Then they have all of the emotional reaction in the next paragraph. You fix this by intermingling the two into one paragraph so that you have
it'd be multiple paragraphs still. It's just that you would put emotion up with the details and action.
Emotion, description, so that you have the POV character. The descriptions are important to the POV character. And through the POV character's attachment to what he's seeing, the reader is attached to what they're seeing because the reader is attached to the character. So make the descriptions personal to the character. Why does the fact that this thing have a miniature tornado underneath it matter? It matters because it matters to the character.
Yeah. And then there is an ly adverb in this paragraph, but it's not one of my 3 reasons for not using it. It actually is a completely different rule of mine called wishy-washy words. When you're wishy-washy, and it just happens to be an ly adverb that's wishy-washy, but it's not in the, like I said, it's not in the ly adverb list. You're weakening your story. I mean, if we just take it out, the Magi collapsed on trembling legs. I can imagine that so much better than the Magi nearly collapsed. Yeah. Now, if the writer's like, oh no, but he doesn't actually fall. Okay, then great. Then you're using the wrong verb. Then he didn't collapse at all. He stumbled, or he, whatever. There's other verbs that we can use and get rid of the nearly, because that is one of the 3 reasons why you shouldn't use an ly adverb when you're using an ly adverb, because you're using the wrong verb. And so the adverb is making up for it. And since collapsed, if you want to show that they almost collapse, then don't use the word collapse, because the wrong verb. Use stumbled, or fell back on trembling legs, or whatever. Because there's a million ways to do that without using a crappy ly adverb.
That makes sense.
That sentence is pretty short. So you can go, the Magi stumbled backward onto his work table on trembling legs.
His legs trembling, if you wanted to add it.
Or his legs trembling, like that. Something like that. Because that then allows you to eliminate the work table from the next sentence and bringing it into the shorter sentence.
One of the things I teach about scene setting, you should scene set. So the old way of doing it was to write 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs, or 2 or 3 or 4 pages where you just describe the entire scene and then you start doing things. I believe a better way to do that is to scene set from start to finish. You never stop scene setting. And so what I tell people is, in every paragraph, you should look for an opportunity to have the POV interact with the scene interact with the POV, or the scene interact with the scene. And my definition of a scene, or when I'm saying scene in this context, I mean anything that isn't the POV. So it could be, if Bob and Sue are secondary characters, it could be Bob, brushing Sue's hair. That's setting. That would be the setting messing with the setting. And then we would know a detail about Bob, we'd know a detail about Sue, we'd know a detail about their actions. But I look for, in every single paragraph, I look for an opportunity to have the POV interact with the setting. So in this case, the Magi stumbled back against his workbench or work table, whatever we're going to use. So now I have the POV interacting with the setting, and that there's a work table behind him because he stumbles into it. I don't have to start with, we're in a Magi lair, and there's a work table on this wall, and 3 sconces on that wall, and a burning brazier over here, and this over there. Like, that's so boring to just spend.
Also on that same topic, like, on the topic, the reason why you should keep scene setting throughout is because white room syndrome isn't just an undescribed room. A room can go white Let's say you describe the whole thing at the top, right? But 5-6 paragraphs down, all you've got is dialogue,
pages down.
Or pages. All you've got is dialogue. The reader has forgotten everything you said up top because they had no context for any of that description. And now the room has gone white, and all they see are the talking heads dialogue.
Yep.
So white room syndrome isn't just about not describing. It is also about letting the scene go white because you don't have the characters interact with the scene at all.
Yeah.
So do you guys think there's instances where you set up the whole scene at the beginning and then instances where you set it up throughout the scene? Or do you think it should always be setting it up throughout the scene?
Very rarely do you set up at front. You can, but very rarely.
Well, so what I'm more want to do is I will do a scene setting, maybe even in the opening paragraph. I usually start in media res. So, I start with something like the Magi casting the spell. And then I might do a line or two that is very big and very vague. So something like the light bounced off the cave walls of the underground lair of the whatever. Like, it's so big and it's so vague that it doesn't give any details, but at least it sets you go, oh, I'm underground, I'm in a cave. Okay. And then as I go on, and that line would be up front. It would be where he casts the spell, way up top. Now we get down here and he's stumbling into work tables and he's, all of this stuff. So now I'm bringing in details as the scene is going along. So I don't mind a line or two of big scene setting in the beginning. I don't do it all the time, but sometimes it's like I need my readers to know we're in an underground cave. And so in the opening paragraph, I'll have something, and again, it's still the POV interacting with the setting interacting with the POV, or the setting interacting with the setting. So like the light from his spell bouncing off this big, echoing in this big cave is the setting interacting with the setting. But a line like that to set the big tone and then start bringing the details as the action rolls through. The whirlwind from the gin might whip up the sandy, the white sandy floor or the black sandy floor or whatever to get in what the floor looks like through the action of the beast and all of this other stuff. So I'm going to be scene setting all the way through to the bitter end. I'm never going to stop scene setting.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, well, awesome. I think that is some absolutely incredible advice. So that we're fair to our time, I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably move us along to the make sure I get the right. Yeah, there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this along. Well, no, it's actually not even that, because here's the thing: like, everything that you guys are going over is incredible. I could literally do this with you guys for hours, but I want to be fair to you. I'm going to be fair to both of you guys and to our audience, especially because editing is just a thing that they're here for, because both of your expertise is incredible. Both of you have published many, many more books. And I think the insight that we learn from this type of editing session, from like the scene setting, the world building, the way that you go about changing sentences and structure, are all great things that a lot of writers, some might think about some of those things, others might not think about that. And I think it's the techniques that we then have to take and apply back into our own settings. And I know myself as a writer, I've been writing my entire life, but every single time I work with other writers, I always learn something new. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be a student of writing. So I just want to say I really, really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing your insight with that. And then also knowing like, okay, so 20 minutes for a paragraph. That's awesome.
Now, just to ask, because it's really late for Marie.
I'm fine.
Are you sure?
You're good.
I was going to ask you, because we would happy to come back if you want us back on your show another time. Because I know you still want to do quite a bit in this one, and we're at what? We started at 1.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're hitting that 140 mark. So what we had planned was we were doing the book reading and some Q&A. To be fair to our time, we could always, what do you guys want to do? Because I want to be fair to you guys with with your schedules, we can always just hop to maybe a couple questions and wrapping it up. I do also want to be able to like point out for anybody who wants to check your guys' book out as well, because I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's always with these with our podcast episodes and this type of live streaming, we get into such dynamic conversations, and even from the first hour of it, I learned so much, and I could tell from how our community was responding, they're learning so much from you guys as well. I realized we could probably do a whole editing session and do that as a couple hours.
Yeah. Well, this is the reason why my critique groups how I run my critique groups in the writer's room, they're 4 hours long, and that may sound like a lot, but there's only 5 people that get to participate, which that also may sound like only a few, but each one gets 45 minutes. And again, that may sound like a lot, but it goes like that.
Yeah.
45 minutes is nothing to work on.
Oh, yeah. I get the same thing with my coaching clients. They're like, okay, we need to develop all this stuff with our story. And I'm like, all right, 2 to 3 hours. Great. And they're like, yeah, that's going to be fine. And I'm like, no, it's never enough time. Trust me.
No.
We know how it goes.
So what I would probably request is, if Marie's cool with it, just going into some Q&As.
Yeah. So why don't we just do some Q&A? So let's do some Q&A. So this is a good portion, and we'll wrap this up. So for anyone who's here in the stream right now, let me throw up the banner. What questions do you have about the building a writing brand, or maybe about some of the editing stuff we saw? Do you have any maybe like technical editing questions for Drake or Marie, or any questions about like making money with your writing brand? Anything and everything works. So I know we had a good couple of call outs here while we were doing the editing session. Let's see, Noah saying great stream. Good job all. Carrie, so glad I found this. We'll have to watch it in full later as well. It's one thing to know it, but it's another to see this in action. Absolutely agreed. And I think a lot of writers get that value from literally seeing it on the screen. And I know you guys do this a lot with your live editing sessions. You're always doing the same format, right? With doing all the editing on the
the screen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So one of our, so Courtney asked a great question, and Drake, this was the same exact question I was actually going to ask you earlier. Can you give your LY rules, your Lee rules? I was curious about this as well.
So the 3 reasons why you should not use LYs are, first of all, if they're redundant. So Drake quickly raced to the other side of the room. What does that do? You can't race any quicker than raced. So if you read, Drake raced to the other side of the room, it doesn't paint a different picture in the reader's mind. In both, Drake is running as quickly as he can across the room. So that's the one. The other is like the malevolent, glared malevolently. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't add anything. And then the last is weak verbs. When you're
too strong, or your verb is too strong or too weak for the action.
That one and this one is probably the very first time where it was just the wrong verb that wasn't weak. Normally it's a weak verb. So it's like
normally it's a weak verb that's being strengthened by an adverb, but this is actually the second time that I've seen a verb that is too strong,
right,
where the adverb is used to weaken the verb.
It. Yeah.
But
normally it's
not
stuff like
but it's not just adverbs that are used for that. It's all your almost, or your perhaps, or like all of those like halfway wishy-washy words. And they're used to weaken a verb that is too strong for its action.
Yeah. So when you have something like Drake gracefully danced across the stage, as opposed to Drake glided across the stage, or whatever. I mean, the beautiful thing about American English language is that it has been created by stealing from every other language on the planet. We have 20 different words that mean the same thing, but they don't. They all evoke a different image and a different emotion. So like in my show don't tell class, which by the way, everyone can see my show don't tell class for free. If you just go to writersroom.us, it's on the front page. You can literally watch my entire hour-long show don't tell class for free. But one of the things I go in there when I'm talking about verbs is like Drake hit the wall. Everyone can see that. But if I write Drake bashed the wall, do you see the same thing, or has the image changed? Drake whack the wall. Again, they all mean the same thing, but you're not seeing the same thing. And so, some of them come with different emotions, like bash the wall. So that's the thing about verbs. And if you're using an ly adverb to strengthen it or weaken it, in the case that we saw today, there's no reason for it. Just be better at choosing the right verb. I mean, you have a plethora to choose from. So, and it will strengthen your writing. It'll strengthen the imagery of the scene, and it will pull the reader deeper into the story. So that's my ly. But sometimes the door slowly closes. Sometimes, and that's fine. The door slowly closes. Great. Awesome. I use ly adverbs probably once a page, once every 2 pages. I have been known to occasionally even use 2 in a paragraph, but like once a book. And it's because it's the right word. It's just the right word to use at that moment, but never redundantly, never to strengthen a weak verb, and never because it adds nothing. Those are
thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Drake. That's awesome. Is Marie, are there any like pet peeves with writing that stick out to you? Oh yes. All right, I'm opening the can of worms.
You are.
So I have 2 big pet peeves. The one is on a plot level, and the other one's on an editing level. On a plot level, I utterly despise flashbacks that come too early, flashbacks that go on too long. And if you give me a flash forward, I will reach through the screen and I will strangle you.
So so flashbacks that come too early, flashbacks so basically flashbacks not coming at the right time.
So if you flash back before you've attached me to the character, I'm done. Like I'm putting your book down, I'm not reading you again. Okay? So never in the first chapter, etc. But a flash forward, to me, man, these things make me angry. So a flash forward is when you borrow tension from the future. And I have seen YouTube channels that recommend this as a strategy to create tension. And I'm like, you, sir, are wrong.
Is it because you want the reader to be focused on the present moment of the character journey, not in the past or then?
So it actually has the same problem as a flashback. Okay. I know what the end destination is because you have told me. I know where the story is going to end. So you've not created tension. I don't care how you get there anymore. You've just given me the end of the story. Why would I care? It was like there was this TV series. Man, I wanted to like this TV series on Amazon, some sort of military. And I love a good military drama. So this was a military drama about the dude who has a list. Chris Pratt, I think, was acting in it.
I think I know which one you're talking about. It was like the future something.
Yeah. Yep. So it starts out with a funeral of a SEAL team. That's the first scene in the first episode. Then they go 2 weeks earlier and they show you the SEAL team alive. And now you have to sit through an entire episode of the SEAL team dying. But you know they're going to die. You have just watched their freaking funeral.
Yeah, it completely deflates.
But isn't that the challenge with doing doing prequels? Because you're writing backstories of characters. Like, let's do Star Wars. Right?
But I'm already in love with the character.
Right. Prequels is its own.
Okay.
Right. That's its own animal.
So it's really about the character journey.
So the 3rd episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did a flash forward.
I remember
and I didn't watch another episode of that show until it finished its run. Like literally 5-6 years later was the next time, because I was so pissed off because it's dumb. So the thing starts off with the side of the plane blowing out and people falling out of it, and then it goes 12 hours earlier.
I remember that.
Like, we know where we're going, but what was really insulting about this, because I'll just groan and be like, whatever. But what was so insulting about this is when we got to the scene. And now they're captured on the plane. They're thrown into the jail of the plane back in the back. We know that the side of the plane is going to get blown out. We know it because we saw it. You showed it to us. Why would I not know that when I just saw it? One of the characters goes, I know how to get us out of here, but you're not going to like it. And I roll because I was like, yeah, I know you're going to blow the side of the plane out and blah, blah, blah. But they even did a step further than that, which is what really pissed me off. Then the character turned to another character and whispered into his ear. So I had to watch a character whisper to another character. I already know what you're saying because you've already shown me what you're doing. And now you're making me watch this guy say nothing to another character. I'm like, I'm out. I literally, it was like 6-7 years. I was so angry. I was like, no.
Oh my God, Drake. That's how I felt with about the end of both Lost and Game of Thrones. That was my.
So those like if you are going to futz with time, make sure you know what you're doing. Like you genuinely know what you're doing, and you're doing it for good reasons. And even then, like test and make sure. So that's my big plot thing, is be careful of time. So my second my editing thing is I despise started, almost, began, then. All of those freaking this little movement, or this started, or then this happened. Yeah, that's how a sentence structure works. Yeah. This is English. English has sentence structure. One thing happens after the other. Like,
and again, that's why you should write in the action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction for the most part.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to go, this happened, and then this happened. It's like, yeah, because it's the next sentence. I'm going to read that next. So I'm going to assume that happened next. It's kind of in the structure.
I don't like then. I don't like started. I don't like began. Yeah. I don't like almost. None of. If you're going to have like began, for example, because people will say, yes, but you didn't finish the action. Okay, cool. Then have the action interrupted.
Yeah.
You know, Giselle.
Like, why have those additional words?
Yeah, Giselle turned towards the door. Alund grabbed her wrist. I actually just wrote that one today, so it's top of mind. Like it.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, and Courtney, you're right. I'm still angry. But somebody did ask a question about that ties into this, because somebody asked about prologues.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's because we've actually been having a debate on this channel. We've been going back and forth on a couple streams on prologues and epilogues. Are they necessary? My stance is sometimes, depending on the story that you're trying to tell.
Everything is always dependent on everything. But if you're writing your opening novel in a series, or if it's a standalone book in a, and you're writing it, it's very easy to decide whether your prologue works or not. If it starts with the word prologue, it has failed. And that's really it. That's the end of it.
So this is where Drake and I have our real fundamental difference of opinion, because I disagree with him. So I believe that a prologue can add value.
It can.
But your prologue must be written for the right reasons. The wrong reasons to write a prologue. I want to show the history of my world. Please don't do that. Okay? That was an 80s habit that needs to stay in the 80s along with shoulder pads. We don't want to bring shoulder pads back. We don't want to bring those kinds of prologues back. They're in the same category. Okay, so none of that. You don't want to do it as like a flash forward. I will hurt you.
we all know
it's
never showing flash forwards or flashbacks with Marie.
Yeah.
So unless she loves your character already.
Unless but then it's not a flash forward. Then you're filling me in on backstory on a character that I love. That's fine. That's a different thing. Okay. So no flash forwards in your prologue. You don't want to do it. So I will not say no to a villain prologue, but you need to be careful with villain prologue. If it's your first book, I wouldn't advise a villain prologue, because that is the introduction of the reader. Is the first introduction of the reader to your world is then a villain, right? Yeah. So while I've got no objection to villain prologues, I would not generally advise them for your first book.
It also a lot of times when you do a villain prologue, it is the same thing as a flash forward. You're actually stealing tension from the future of the story. You're giving away more. You think you're doing it to hook the reader, but what has actually happened is now they kind of know where things are going, and that's not what they want. They want to discover it.
I mean, you're technically stealing from the plot by showing the antagonist first.
Yeah.
So but I wrote my first book has a prologue, right? But the purpose of my prologue is to show the inciting incident of the series, which is the death of a duke.
There you go. Okay? Because it's intentional.
So it is this dude he is straight up just experiencing his death, and it's short. And if the reader skips it, they skip it. It's not the end of the world, right?
But it's also more, yours is more like a murder mystery. So a lot of murder mysteries start with the murder. So it's not, you don't know the cop, you don't know the detective, you don't know the old lady who's putting her nose in other people's business, whatever mystery that you're doing. You just watch the murder. And so
you don't see the murderer's face. This is important.
Right. You don't see any of it.
Yeah.
So you're doing it in your prologue. It's more like a murder mystery prologue, which I think is fine. There's one other thing that they do all the time.
George R. Martin's Game of Thrones prologue does the same kind of thing, right? He doesn't really show you the others, but you get the sense of impending doom from the others. And the reason why he does that is because he is drawing, because he's this side of the wall. On this side of the wall, he's all it's all like politics and so on, and there's very little of the fantasy elements. But he's setting up the fantasy threat, right? So the prologue is entirely about creating the fantasy threat to remind the reader that there is this threat that none of these guys know about. So it literally it ups the tension over here, because you watch them politicking and you're like, but that thing's coming. The bus is coming for you all. And you guys can't see it because you're so blind. Oh my God, the bus is going to hit them. So, and that's what the purpose of his prologue is. So your prologue, if done for the right reasons, absolutely can.
Well, there's one more big thing that they do in prologues that's bad. And that's when you do a prologue to show the reader the character losing, and this is where dream sequences come into play or whatever, where you're trying to show the reader what the character fears losing the most. The problem with that is I don't care about the character yet. So I'm never going to care about what they care about losing. So you're really putting the cart in front of the horse on that one. You need to first make us care about the character, then make us care about what they. So like if you have a dream sequence as your second chapter, third chapter, whatever, those work much better, because like, oh my goodness, I love, you know, like let's say the dream sequence is his house burning down and his wife and kids dying. If you do that as a prologue, I don't care about the wife and kids. I don't care about him. I don't care about any of this. So, but once I care about him and I see his relationship with his wife and his kids, and then he has this dream, I'm like, ooh, no, don't do that. I love this family. I care about this family. Now it matters. And so a lot of times they do that.
Same thing with flashbacks. Once you've attached me to the character, flashing back is fun.
Yeah, because I care now. Because
now I'm interested. But don't start me in a flashback. We're going to have a very severe problem.
I think from what I'm hearing from both you guys, it sounds with both the flashback, right, the flashbacks, flash forwards, and then prologues, probably epilogues as well, is it's the core story is from chapter 1 to the last chapter. Right. If I'm going to be doing a prologue and epilogue, if I'm going to be doing a flashback, flash forward, what is the intention of it, and how is it serving the character's journey or the story that I'm trying to tell? And I would absolutely agree.
So two things. First of all, I see epilogue is very different, because again, that comes back to like prequels, because I now care. I now I've gone through this entire novel with you. You hit me with an epilogue of what life is like after this journey or whatever. Yeah, okay, I want to see that because I cared about this journey and I care about what happens to these characters after the story. So I think epilogues are different. Here's really what it boils down to me, and this is kind of the way I try to teach it. Stop writing things for yourself. You know the whole story. You love every character. So when you start off with a flashback, you're starting off with a flashback of a character you love. No one else does. You have to get in the mindset of, I have to buy the reader's loyalty and love. Then I can give them the things that I love. Because I got to make them love this character as much as I do. I've got to make, that's the first job. It's always about, and that's where the writers fail. They forget that they have knowledge that no one else has at the time. And so they do the prologue, or they do the flashback or the flash forward because they love it. And again, that goes back to something I said earlier during this thing, where they make a mistake of, oh, you're just going to read it because I love it. No one's going to read it because you love it. Literally no one. And so that's the reason why prologues and flashbacks fail, is because you're writing them for yourself and your love of the story, but no one else has that yet. And so if you can change that mentality of, oh, right, I have to make you love it first. And then once I succeed at that, I own you. I can do whatever I want. I can do flashbacks. That's why I said epilogues and prequels. I think they're fine because you already love the characters, and that's all that matters. It's the loyalty and love of the fan. As soon as they have the same loyalty and love to the story as you have, they will follow you down any path you want to go, because that's what they want. They want that information. And so the failure is you just stop. You forget that no one cares yet.
So that's some absolutely great feedback and great advice on all of those mechanics. Real quick, I'm going to speed through these last two questions. Favorite authors. What are some, both of you guys, favorite authors you would recommend?
So Sanderson, and it was specifically favorite authors who teach. So Sanderson has got a YouTube channel where he's uploaded some of his lectures, and he's got a podcast and so on. He gives some very solid advice. So absolutely go check out Sanderson. If you're into grim dark, Mark Lawrence has a YouTube channel. He doesn't post very regularly, but he does do some interesting things on it occasionally. James Sutter on YouTube is worth not on YouTube, on Twitter is worth following. Yeah, on X. Sorry, that thing. Didn't mean to dead name it. Sorry, Elon's bird. So
on Twitter, X formerly Twitter.
So yeah, those are worth following. Yeah, those are my three. My absolute favorite author in all the world is Jacqueline Carey, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones that I would recommend if I was looking for other people teaching writing. I'm pretty eclectic when it comes to reading. I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan, but I'm also a huge, Robert Jordan fan, and Robert Aspin, Joel Rosenberg, Brandon Sanderson. So, I mean, I read epic fantasy. So, but I'm also, fans of adventure fantasy. So Terry Brooks and David Eddings and that whole lot. So yeah, I mean, I read a lot.
Perfect. And then advice for someone writing fan fiction.
I don't know. It's not, like, honestly, it's not a genre I've ever written in. I believe there are, like, as far as I know, Archive of Our Own is the biggest fanfic site that I know of. So you might want to post some there. I've got a couple of fanfic writers in my Discord. So there is a, like, I would go look for a fanfic community on Discord and so on. Especially in like the thing that you want to write in, the specific thing that you want to fanfic, right? Because obviously fanfics have their genre, whatever, like Pokemon fanfic or whatever. So I would go look for a community like on Discord or so on that is into that fanfic and ask it, because I'm not sure how you approach that, to be completely honest.
I will add this. I've never written fanfic either. It's just not my thing. I also don't read it. However, I do recommend it a lot to writers.
I agree.
I would rather writers write in fanfic and cut their teeth on that than to go, well, I'm just going to self-publish because there's no gatekeeper and I'll just learn along the way. It's like, because you're just adding white noise to the professional game and you're not ready yet. So, and plus the worst part about it is not just that it hurts me and Marie, because now we have more white noise out there that we have to, cut through. But The big problem is that once you step into the game, whatever name you decide to use, that's a forever name. For that whatever you put out, it never goes away. So if you do John Smith and that's the name you want to write under, and then you just put out your first stuff because you're going to learn along the way, and you get a bunch of 1-star reviews, those don't ever go away. They stay forever. And so, like I always say, this is one of the weird things about this industry is we're the only industry where a customer, when they're dissatisfied with us, stands out front of our place of business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And every single customer that comes to our door, they say, hey, that person sucks. They're a terrible business. You shouldn't go in there, because your reviews stay forever. They never go away. Now, sure, you can just create another author name. But if you do that, now that author name is creating with the other author, or is competing against the other author name and having to cut through its white noise. So I recommend all the time, if you're wanting to learn how to write and you want to just be out there and start, first of all, you can develop a fan base. And when you do move over, all those fans that, started liking your fanfic, you say, hey, I've got my own stuff now too. Why don't you come over and check that out? So that's one way to do it. But also, no one cares if you're cutting your teeth, if you're making mistakes and learning the ropes and everything like that when you're in fanfic. It's kind of a part of the genre. And so you're not going to hurt your brand. I mean, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the Drake brand. It is a brand like Nike or Coke or McDonald's. Drake, that's my brand. I don't want to have a book out there with 1-star reviews. That's going to destroy my brand. And so I love fanfic, even though I've never read it or written in it. I recommend it all the time as a place for writers. If you really want to get out there in the public and have strangers giving you feedback and all of that, and kind of treating you like the same that they'll treat you when you're in the professional game, then that's a great stepping stone to get into that, because it's not going to hurt your brand. And you can use your real name, or you can use your writer name. You can not use your writer name, whatever. It's fanfic. But it's a great stepping stone for that. And then you're not clogging up the professional world with stuff that shouldn't be there. And you're also not hurting your own brand once you do step into that professional game.
Awesome. I think that's some absolutely great advice. Thank you both for your expertise. So with wrapping that up, I always have one final question I have to ask all my guests. If tomorrow was your last chapter in the book of life, you got hit by a bus, what is one quote or one philosophy of your own that you would want to leave with the writers of the world?
I prepped for a different question that you were going to ask. That wasn't on the list.
It's not. This is my curveball question. I remember growing up watching the Actors Studio. He would always ask this very life or death question at the end, and it always resonated with me.
Yeah. So, well, first, Courtney, yes, Wattpad. That is the same. So, yes, yeah. Wattpad as well.
Do you want me to answer? Because
well,
I can.
You answer it, but after I'm going to tell a story.
Okay.
So
let me tell my story and then you answer.
Okay. All right.
So I'm sitting in the doctor's office. I know something's wrong because the doctor has rushed me through a bunch of tests, and obviously you're thinking the worst. And he pops open the door and he's like, "All right, you have cancer. It's probably stage 4. You probably have less than a 10% chance to live, but this is what we're going to do about it." And so he sits there and he starts going through this stuff, and I'm listening to him. But I always have 2 conversations going on at the same time. And so in one conversation, I've got my calendar, and he's like, "This is when we're going to do the biopsy, and this is when we're going to do this, and this is when he's not even asking me if I'm available," which is fine because now I'm available for everything. And so I'm going through and I'm scheduling and I'm doing this stuff and I'm listening to him. But in the other conversation, I'm going, okay, this is where I'm at on this fantasy saga. What do I need to plot so that I can get X writer to, that's a friend of mine that will finish this for me? And what can I do here? And how can I set this series up so I can get it finished by, either by finishing it or, plotting it out to give someone else. And so that's going on in my other brain where I'm, thinking about all the projects that I have going and all the things that I want to have finished for my fans. And then a quote popped into my head. somebody had asked Isaac Asimov one time, if you had a year left to live, what would you do? And he said, I'd write faster. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I was sitting there listening to the plan to save my life from cancer, and I was writing faster. And it made me laugh because I thought it was funny. And my doctor is a very serious doctor. If you die on him, it's an affront to him. And so he stopped and he was like, excuse me, this is not funny. There is nothing to laugh about here. You're going to do what I'm telling you. I'm like, no, it had I'm listening. It was something else. But yeah. So when I was told that I may have less than a year to live, I wrote faster. That's literally what I did. And I didn't realize I was doing it. But if tomorrow was your last chapter, Marie, what would you leave to the audiences?
So Drake has accused me of being a nihilist on occasion. Okay. Because I do not believe that anything has objective value.
I'm the optimist in our relationship.
But I do not see, the thing is, I do not see that as a negative or a nihilistic viewpoint. I see it as a freeing viewpoint.
Yeah.
Nothing has objective value. Whatever you give value has value. We, the transient beings who live in this moment, we are what give everything value. And that makes you the absolute first-person POV hero of your story, because everything in your life only has value because you give it value. Even to the extent of eating or your life or whatever. There's a great book by an author called Camus, a French philosopher, about this topic, the absurdism. We give value to our lives. Therefore, our lives have value because of us. And that is, to me, that is very freeing. And
I'll give a real answer to it. Not that hers, I'm saying mine wasn't a real answer. That sounded horrible. I did not mean it that way. I meant my answer was not a real answer. Because, yeah, and we get in discussions about nihilism all the time. Like I said, we talk a lot. Our podcast has no politics, has no social, has no religion or anything like that. We don't feel that that's appropriate. But we do have that in our personal life. So we do talk about it because we're friends and we talk about all that stuff. But here's what I would say. Here's what I would leave you with. Storytellers are the most important people in a society, period. Humanity gets its moral compass from stories. Now, that could be religion. Religion is a collection of stories. I'm not saying that it's real, not real, or anything. I'm not disparaging it, but no Christian would ever deny that the Bible is not a collection of stories. So humanity gets its moral compass from stories. And I do feel that in recent times, stories have lost their moral compass. They've lost their value. They're no longer pushing humanity to want to be better. They're worried about offending people. They're worried about whatever. So on my website, the very first thing that you'll see is what I call my Bard's Oath. And it's right at the top. And it says, my job as a storyteller is to take my readers from the safety and comfort of wherever they're at, put them into a very uncomfortable, very unsafe situation, force them to deal with topics they don't want to deal with, so that hopefully they emerge from the other side of the story a better human being. Stories are the most important aspect of society, period. And no one will ever convince me differently of that. Our job is sacred and important and vital for a healthy society. So the thing that I would leave is, don't lose that. Keep that torch burning. Understand that it is storyteller's job is to make people uncomfortable. It is to force them to deal with stuff they don't want to deal with. Talk about and force them to deal with, harsh topics, because hopefully they will become better human beings because of our stories. And so that's what I would leave people with if I was to get hit by a bus today.
Thank you so much for that. Both of your answers were very, very heartwarming. Thank you so much.
Hers is more of a human being, answer.
And I think that that's why I can tell how much each of you care about your craft, the craft of storytelling, and how much you guys have such a strong connection as both writers and friends. And I think today's conversation has been absolutely incredible. I have learned so much from both of you today, just from brand building, from editing, and from a lot of nuances and minutia of world building, writing, never using never using the ly words anymore ever again. I will never use those again, I promise. And a bunch of other things in the world of writing. I think today's been absolutely phenomenal. I would 100% love to have you guys back in the future. I just want to say I really appreciate both your time. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was great being here. And I love Courtney's last comment. It was, and she's right.
Let's see it. Courtney, yes, my smutty books matter.
Absolutely. All books matter.
Completely agree, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing that. And for those of our audience here, whether you're here on the stream or whether you're watching on the replay, once again, if you want to find more about Drake or Marie, where can they find you guys?
So for me, it's Starving Writer Studio has everything. It has links to all our podcasts. It's where the warehouse is to sell. I set up Starving Writer Studio. I left the publishing industry recently. And so Starving Writer Studio is set up. All of my marketing is geared towards stop giving Jeff Bezos more money. If I am giving you value, then I use the same shipping carriers that he uses. Just order it direct. And Marie's stuff is on my stuff when she's here. There's not everything, because some of it you'll have to get from Amazon. But if you want autograph stuff, I've got some of her stuff as well if you're in the States.
And for me, you can get links to everything on mariemullaney.com.
Mm-hmm. So perfect. All of their links are down below in the YouTube video description. They're the website, the links to the books, and all the other stuff if you want to know more about either of them. Drake, Marie, once again, thank you again for being guests. I really appreciate you guys.
This was awesome.
Beautiful. And as I get to creative writing on the morrow, so thank you for joining us today. That has been an absolutely dynamic discussion. If you found value out of the stream, follow and subscribe. I am a daily writing live streamer. We got writing sprints. Next weekend, we're going to go back to the Saturday story and critique show. So if you have an excerpt of your story you need feedback for, definitely make sure you submit. Next Sunday, we're going to be hosting a guest about horrors, thrillers, and graphic gore and all that fun stuff. So we always have guests, writing events, and all the things. So if you're following or subscribed, you'll be alerted when we go live. And if you're looking for something to watch next, down in the YouTube video description is one of our previous episodes, topic about mental health with author Pat Mullany. It was such a dynamic discussion about balancing mental health with his unique approach using the 2 a.m. method. And also, tap that like button on your way out. Show us some love. Let me know and help us show the algorithms that writing streams are cool. And that, my friends, is all that I got for you today. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.